So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our fourth quarter MMA educational seminar, Measure Your Marketing to Deliver Value to Your Organization. We're very excited to have Jim Umberger from AlixPartners with us today. As a consultant, Jim has recent experience working within the marine space and has very relevant marketing measurement experience with some incredible brands that we're all very familiar with and that Jim will walk us through today. And we've likely interacted with one or two of the programs that he'll reference during the call as well. So as Jim goes through his presentation today, we will pause at the end of each section for a quick discussion. So please feel free to come off mute at that time and participate. If you have questions that you want to save to the end, we'll also have time afterwards to address those as well. So without further ado, Jim, go ahead and kick us off.
Thanks, Katie. I appreciate that introduction. Thanks, everyone, for letting me join you today. As Shelby and Katie were looking for a speaker for this topic, it kind of seemed like a natural fit with my background and my experience. Really, I've only been a management consultant for 2 years. Prior, I had a little over 25 years on the client side, and as you can see, with some pretty big brands, and was really fortunate, I feel, in my career to be able to do some really interesting entrepreneurial work in larger organizations. So I'm going to take you through several case studies today of things that I've learned along the way and strategies that I've implemented that really address this topic, and hopefully will bring some of this to life for you. So I've got 3 key levers, and then I'll leave you with some immediate things you can do to impact your business. But first off, just in terms of my career, I think that there's a couple of critical moments in my career. One was at the very beginning, and I'm dating myself here when I say that back in 1993, I was hired. My first job out of undergrad was for a regional investment firm. And back then, stockbrokers literally had 4 or 5 phone books on their desk, and they would randomly call people, and that's how they built their business. And so my boss, the director of marketing at the time, said, I want to build a marketing database. I want to help these brokers understand what their book of business looks like. And so I literally once a month would walk 4 blocks down to our data center, and I would carry this big, huge box with these big data reels that were about this big. And I would get 8 or 10 of them, and I would load them into this SCSI disk drive, which was literally the size of 2 desktop laser printers that sat on my desk. And eventually I had to get another one, and I stacked them on top of one another, and I thought I was just the coolest thing ever. And those were 1 gig a piece. So one little call out is just to pause for a moment for all of us to say, wow, 30 years ago, I had 2 gig and it took up half my desk. And now we all carry this phone and we've got 100 gig or more. So the point there is things have progressed tremendously over 30 years. But using data early in my career, I early on saw the impact that marketing can make if you were close to the data. And I loved that aspect of it. So as much as I've loved the creative side of branding and other aspects of marketing events, I've always loved database marketing because you can measure it and you can control it, and you can, really, it always links back to the business, and you can see the direct impact. You can measure the impact you've had on the business. And so that was one critical moment in my career, and I carried that through. And so I ended up at Ogilvy One, which is a big global ad agency, and I was in a specialty firm in Minneapolis called Ogilvy One Loyalty, and I was working on a couple of loyalty programs, smaller programs, and I was fortunate, very fortunate, because I was young in my career. I was in my late 20s. I was promoted to a director, and the vice president of strategy and consulting picked me and 3 other people to help him with our new project, which was to design a loyalty program for the hotel space that would break all the rules. And the private equity owner of Sheraton and Westin Hotels said, break all the rules. I want something that doesn't exist in market. So really, to his credit, he gave us free rein to really think outside the box. And that's really the other secondary critical moment in my career, was to be able to link data with big thinking and innovative, transformational type thinking and strategy, and to see what we were able to do with the preferred guest program and really disrupting not only the travel industry, but the entire loyalty space, frankly, was really a critical kind of pinnacle moment for my career. And as a result, then you may ask, well, geez, he's at all these different industries. He's been at retail and e-com and hospitality and restaurants. And satellite, and even healthcare. And the reason for that is that after my experience at Starwood, recruiters just would continually call and they'd say, we want to do that Starwood thing. We want disruption. We want to do something dramatically different. And so that's really the cornerstone of my career. And I would say my passion as a marketer is I love to think differently. I love to break things and I like to create things anew. So with that, let's jump in. As I mentioned, I'm going to take you through 3 levers. But first off, I wanted to pause and just recognize the current situation that you are all in. I know there's pent-up demand that's been wavering now since post-COVID. So that kind of that dramatic wave, if you will, is sort of subsiding. We all know that there's ongoing recessionary concerns, and that's literally impacting every industry. Businesses, as a result, are reducing expenses, including marketing, staff, and budgets. And retention and driving business value are even more critical than ever. So this topic, therefore, is even more critical than ever. So what I've decided to focus on are 3 primary measurement levers to ensure that your marketing is delivering value. So the first off is just ensuring that you align your KPIs with the business objectives. And I'm going to share with you 2 very different cases that really align to this lever, and hopefully we'll bring this concept to life to you in a very compelling way. And the second is really making sure that you leverage that data and your performance measurement to ultimately produce better outcomes. And I kind of think of this as sort of a flywheel. We're all busy as marketers getting campaigns into market, but so many times that we've all done this, you're so busy that you don't really go full circle and report back those results or take the time to think through what insights did we learn from that and how can we optimize future campaigns. So that's kind of the theme there. And then the third one is how do we utilize marketing measurement for accurate prioritization and timing? And that one I think is more critical than ever based on the bullets above, and knowing that with recessionary concerns and just it seems like the climate really post the 2008 recession, marketing teams are continually strapped. There's never enough people or never enough budget. So I thought that one would be very impactful as well. So let's jump into the first one, ensuring your KPIs are aligned to your business objectives. This one is focused on PF Chang's. We were in the middle of redesigning the PF Chang's loyalty program, and I was reviewing the program design with the agency before we shared it with the executive team. And they added a few things overnight, and they came to me and they said, oh, they're going through it, and they said, we're gonna propose that you just give people a free appetizer to enroll in the program. And I said, no. And they were kind of surprised that I shut them down so hard. And I said, why would we do that? What's the strategy behind that? And they didn't have an answer. Their answer actually was terrible. It was, well, that's what every other restaurant does. And so my response is the last thing I want to do is have a Me Too moment and just do what everyone else does. But more importantly, my reaction was that that's just going to encourage bad data, because value seekers are going to come in every time they come into the restaurant. They're going to use a different email or a different phone number, and we're going to have all these duplicate profiles. And so I was focused on thinking through the data and how we could use it, whereas they were just focused on how are we going to enroll people. And secondarily, and equally important, is that it wouldn't motivate engagement in the program. So as a loyalty expert or someone who's worked on a lot of programs, I knew by this point that you've got to engage people in programs early on or they just fizzle. And we all know that. The market is so saturated with loyalty programs now that if it's not truly differentiated or doesn't present enough value or utility, consumers are not going to engage with it because there's so many others that they are currently engaging with. So what I proposed instead is I said, I want an enrollment offer that invests people into the program. Now, the secondary reason that we ended up with this value prop is that I had an insight from the COO, and he said one of the things he wanted to manage with this launch was, he said, our turnover in our restaurants, our server turnover is 300 to 400%. So that means every 3 to 4 months, there's an entirely new staff on the floor. And he said, I don't want to have to take a ton of time explaining a complex program. Servers are there to make tips and turn tables. They don't want to have to even think about this program. You need to keep it simple. And so my promise to him was, I will summarize this value prop in 1 sentence. And so the way we did that, and you can see in the box here, it was 10 points per dollar spent. 2,000 points was a free entree. And so what servers were trained to say was, would you like to join our loyalty program today? I can give you 1,000 points for enrolling. You'll be halfway to a free entree. And that was it. That's all we trained them to do. And then when they finished dining, their check would come, and the bottom of the check reinforced these numbers. It showed them at 2,000 points, they have a free entree. Average check size was $75. So the bottom of the receipt would say, you earned 750 points today. So it doesn't take a mathematician to say, oh, wow, everyone left the restaurant saying, with just a little bit more spend, we have a free entree already. And so what that ended up doing is it created what we call the 3 trips in 90 days effect. And one detail that I forgot to mention up front is that being a legacy brand, PF Chang's private equity owners hired several of us like myself from outside the industry to really drive disruption, because our mandate was get the nose of the plane back up. Revenue had been sliding for 10 years. And so we needed to get the nose of the plane back up. And at the time I started, average visits per year was 2.5. So the brand had gone from a 5 to 7 time per year visit type brand to a special occasion only brand, 2 to 2.5 times a year. What this offer actually ended up doing is it drove 3 trips in 90 days, because you left the restaurant with 1,750 points. You're motivated to come back quickly. On the second visit, your receipt would say, you just earned a free entree. It expires in 60 days. And so in 60 days, we were driving 3 visits, which was far more than the annual average. So the result was our days between visit went from 120 to 75. And our average check went from 100 to 150. And the reason for that is that we proved this at Starwood and other programs as well. Loyalty members, when they redeem, they almost always spend more than they typically do because they got something for free. So the takeaway here is thinking through what action you're motivating and how it will be measured. So again, the agency was focused on enrolling members. We need an offer to enroll members. I was focused on how do we engage our new members and how do we drive more revenue? So the application for the business here is, are your campaigns or your offers motivating the right behaviors for maximum impact and customer lifetime value? So in other words, an opt-in or a lead is just the beginning. And thinking through the full funnel of how you take that lead from an event or an opt-in box or whatever it is, an online lead, to taking it all the way through to a sale, and then ultimately even to accessories and parts and everything else that goes with the boat purchase. Thinking through all those critical moments of truth and understanding where you can drive additional value and revenue from that lead, and then bringing it back to what did that lead cost us? And then evaluating your channels that are most valuable, and then doubling down and focusing on those. So the second example, as I mentioned earlier, is very different. I was recruited by the CEO and the CMO of eBay, and I got a call from a recruiter, and she said, eBay is the legacy, one of the first e-commerce brands. In almost 30 years, they've never focused on customer retention. They've only focused on acquiring new members to their website. It just blew my mind. And she said, with your background, they want you to come in and build the company's first ever customer retention engagement department. And of course, I jumped at the chance to work in Silicon Valley and to just be surrounded by incredibly smart people. It was very humbling. And learned a ton, but also had a lot to bring to the table because, as I mentioned, they had never ever focused on retention. So one of the things that I found most incredible and engaging at eBay is that on Monday mornings, we had what's called a Go meeting. And this meeting was designed to bring all of us, we had an America's leadership team. We'd come into a big conference room. There were 12 of us. And then each week, different directors would come in and present things that were impacting the business. And one of my managers, I was on day one, I didn't even know the guy. He stood up and he presented a program and he said, we did a site-wide discount over the weekend. It was 10 million in offer cost to generate it, I think 70 million in top line volume or revenue. And everyone clapped and they thought it was a huge success. And I leaned over to the CMO and I said, how do you know that a site-wide promotion drives profitable EBITDA? And she just gave me a blank stare and she said, go figure it out. So incredible resources at eBay. I had 20 people, 20 analysts helping me, 10 onshore, 10 in India. So literally 24 hours a day, they were analyzing numbers, an incredibly talented team. And in less than a week, we had our answer. And this is what happens. a program that the entire executive team celebrated as a success was actually losing the company money. So one of the insights I knew from interviewing there is that I had learned that the top customers are on the website 4 to 5 times a day. And it's mainly because they're buyers, but also sellers. And so my reaction, and the reason I prompted the question to the CMO is I'm thinking, if all these people are on the site every day, a site-wide promotion is just eroding margin. And this is what that's showing you. Those top customers are in the top decile on the left. That's almost 80% of the profit of the US market. And at the bottom are the value seekers who are only hitting the site when there's a site-wide promotion. And you can see on the far right, the loss of profitability in the bottom decile actually cannibalized the next 6 deciles. So the takeaway here is that stop marketing to the people on the far right and reinvest that spend into deciles 2, 3, and 4. And what we found is that if you would just get one more purchase from people in deciles 2, 3, and 4, it was 3 times the revenue. And so this is just another view of the profitability and what it was doing over a 5-year period. So, you know, before I started, the CEO was driving this big initiative of new buyers, new buyers, new buyers, and he was focused on buyer growth. And what you can see here on the bottom, customers with 0 profitability were growing exponentially, and our most profitable customers were dwindling. And so what it literally was doing is it was tanking the business, and no one saw it. So bottom line net profit, net revenue, net income was actually slowly diminishing, and they couldn't figure out why. And this is actually what was causing it. So in other words, you know, understanding the importance of analytics and decision making and making sure you understand the true cost of a lead. Not every lead is a good lead. Now that's kind of a compelling statement to make, but it's true. And I've seen it now in consulting time and time again. So the application to the marine business, what do your most valuable leads look like? Take the time to understand and assess the value of your leads, the sources of the leads, and ultimately what they're producing long-term, that long-term customer value. Fewer, more higher quality leads may actually be worth more than unprofitable ones. And I'm going to quickly actually highlight for you an example that I took the CMO through to illustrate to her what was happening. If you focus in the middle under these headshots in the bold numbers, these are 2 random customers. So you've got Karen, who spends $2,800 in GMV, which is gross merchandise bought. It's an e-com term, which essentially is top line revenue. And his checker rate is 7%. Raul spends $4,300 a year, and his checkout rate is 4.9%. Most brands moving at lightning speed would look at that and say, oh, these are great customers. These are our best customers. But if you lift the hood and look underneath at the mechanics of what was actually happening from a marketing perspective, Karen was actually a very good customer, and Raul was actually unprofitable. So in the interest of time, I won't go through all these rows, but just, you know, understanding what it takes to convert that lead and understanding the net profitability is critical to any marketing campaign. So I'm going to pause there. I think Katie, you'll open it up if anyone has any questions on this first lever related to KPIs aligning to business objectives. We can maybe take 1 or 2 now, and then we'll keep moving, and we'll have time at the end as well for questions or comments.
Yeah, please feel free to come off mute or drop your comment or question in the chat. We have one.
Keep going.
Jim, I just have one comment. I think it's really important for all of us. You know, all of our marketers are focused on KPIs, or hopefully we are across the industry, to measure our marketing. But I think the really important part here is really understanding the connectivity to sales and what the true impact of those leads are. So I really appreciate the focus here and the examples.
Great, thanks, Shelby. Good comment. All right, second lever is leveraging performance measurement to produce better business outcomes. Another P.F. Chang's example, I mentioned they were private equity owned, and it's really the reason I went there. I wanted to work for private equity. I thought it would be an incredible growing experience and a great challenge. And I always tell people those monthly board meetings with private equity owners was literally like Shark Tank. It was, what have you done for me in the last 30 days? And so they were very stressful and had a lot of, very successful executives on our board. And I just finished presenting the loyalty launch plan and our CRM strategy and our digital transformation roadmap. And one of our CEOs was a retail, he was a CEO of a retailer, and he made a very compelling comment, which was, why are you only doing one email a week? And he said, I think you should be doing daily emails. And the whole room erupted. And as I'm sure many of you can probably relate to this dilemma as marketers, you probably sat in the same position where I was literally feeling like I was pulled between, two sides of the room. Long story short, it was my job to go back and figure out how to keep everybody happy. And so what I ended up producing was a templated approach. So previously, and again, I'm sure many of you can relate to this, we had a lot of content and information to talk about, but we only produced one email a week, primarily, partly because we didn't think people in restaurants needed more than one email a week. I hated being spammed. I hate the retail, email a day type approach. And so, but also it was a capacity issue. I didn't have a big team, and it was a lot of work and demand on our creative team to create all the content. And so what I came up with was what I call the 6-box strategy. And you'll see it in the lower left. We created 2 templates. I had already been working with IT to automate the loyalty content in our emails so we could have dynamic real-time content. So the timing of this template approach was perfect. So essentially what would happen is on Mondays, we'd send email 1, and the top box would be any hero message or content, a limited time offer, or some sort of a new launch, new menu item. And the bottom email, the bottom tile rather, it was personalized to the customer. So if you were in the weekend before and you redeemed an offer, we would say, congratulations, you redeemed, congratulations on your redemption. We hope you enjoyed your free entree. Similarly, we tested things like, thinking through the moments of truth. So I called that a moment of truth when someone redeemed an entree, because most people obviously would leave the restaurant pleased that they just got something for free. Perfect time to say, a lot of times that second box, the second tile would say, leave us a Yelp review, give us a review. How was your visit, right? And then the second template would blast on Thursdays. And this is an opportunity for us to repeat content. So box 1 would become box 4. We'd repeat that special offer or that special announcement. Box 5 would become real-time versioned offer that was specific to that customer based on their behavior. Again, it could be a survey prompt, it could be an offer. Box 6 on the lower right was always loyalty content or a loyalty offer, and that was strategically placed in the bottom right. So we were training people to open and go through the entire email. And so the idea here was we actually we solved all the problems, and we satisfied everyone's demand for more emails. So you see on the left there, we went from 5.5 emails a week to 10 or 11. Per month rather, 5 to 10 per month. Our click-through rates were a little bit higher when we launched loyalty, and then they stabilized, but they always stayed higher than pre-loyalty. But then you can see the open rates went up incrementally. And that was because of the relevancy of the content that we had in the emails. So takeaway here is allow your data to inform what content and cadence can maximize your output and your results. So, I love to say that, timeliness and relevancy are key. And with customers now in this day and age they're much more open to sharing data, and they're not as concerned about privacy. But as marketers, it's our responsibility to be prepared to use it. So that's kind of the theme here. And the application for the industry is, how can you maximize the output of your teams and your programs? Think outside the box. I want to challenge you guys to think like we've been doing it this way for so long, but is it the best way? Can we do it in a more efficient manner and actually get better results, which is what the 6-box provided us. The second example is going to take a little bit of time to explain, but I think it'll be worth it because it's a pretty compelling, it's probably one of the most exciting campaigns I've actually built in my career and I'm most proud of. I wish I was in the room with you guys, because I would ask the question and I see all the hands go up. How many of you received a timeshare offer in the mail with the traditional brochure and the letter? And we all know that the back of the letter is a full legalese saying you're getting this great offer because you're agreeing to a 2-hour timeshare tour during your vacation. When we started building Westin Villas, we were very concerned, and the hotel owners, we would always build villas next to a hotel. We would use the hotel to house our tours. And so the general manager of the hotels would always say, I don't want you eroding my brand experience with this timeshare sales stuff. And it's a fair concern because the industry did not have a good reputation. And so what we did is we didn't sell vacation packages. We went in and market with the brand Westin Vacations. And I would sell you a 7-day, 6-night stay in Maui for $700, which was heavily subsidized with no commitment or requirement to tour. Now, how did I do that? We worked through a series of touch points, and this kind of goes back to the industry application of thinking through a boat show or a lead gen and follow it all the way through and figure out where you can maximize the value for your business. We would sell the vacation with no commitment to tour, just come and stay at our resort. And the positioning was, we're hoping that you'll have such a great time, you'll be committed to the Westin brand for all of your vacations in the near future. And so what I had to do is I had to actually think through, how do we get these people to convert to a tour? Because if I didn't, we were just burning a ton of money. And so we started by doing things like each of the hotels, the general managers were concerned about brand sentiment and customer satisfaction, as I mentioned. So my boss went to them and said, what, let us take over your concierge. We will provide better service than you do, which was a pretty compelling proposition. But hotel GMs are constantly face tough budgets. So they're like, sure. And they told us in 6 months, if my customer satisfaction score goes down, you're out. And guess what happened? The satisfaction score actually doubled. And the reason that it did is because we had highly trained salespeople that were very engaged and heavily compensated to book a tour working the concierge. So they provided the just impeccable service. But then on top of that, we started, and I picked this top picture on purpose because this is actually the boardwalk on Kaanapali North Beach in Maui. We put marketing desks along the boardwalk. And one of the things that we needed to do was collect leads from people staying at the resort south of us. And so as people would walk up the beach in the evenings looking for restaurants, our marketing team would be collecting leads. Hey, do you want to come back and stay at the Westin Maui? I can give you a great offer. And so this case is really about, how do we generate more leads? But before I get there, I want to finish the story. So we took over the concierge desk. Eventually, I hired 2 people to sit next to me, next to my office in California, and they would do pre-arrival calls. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. My name is Jennifer. I'm going to be your personal concierge next week for your stay on Maui. How can I make your stay as memorable as possible? And she would tell them about restaurants nearby, and she would offer to book them tea times. And the response was overwhelming. Everyone would say the same thing. Oh my gosh, no hotel has ever done anything like this for me. Jennifer built a relationship and a rapport with those customers, sometimes for 2 weeks. And so guess what happened when they showed up at the front desk? They were looking for the concierge. Where's Jennifer? I need to see Jennifer at the concierge. She has my folder. And Jennifer was there ready, someone other than Jennifer was there to give them their folder, tell them about their week, offer to provide any service they need. And at the very end, it was a very light touch. Oh, and make sure you take a look at the villas next door that they're building. They're beautiful. And that was it. So throughout the week, we would design all these touch points to raise awareness to the villas. And ultimately, though, I needed to get a certain percentage of these people to commit to a 2-hour tour. So Katie, with your help, I'm going to ask all of you to just put in the chat, what % of those vacation arrivals do you think actually agreed to a 2-hour timeshare tour by the end of their week? If you can just quickly put that into the chat. I can't see the chat because I'm presenting, but I've asked Katie to just sort of call out for me on average what she's seeing as your guesses. So I'll give you just a second.
43, 20, 60, 65, 35, 35. Right,
When we-
60. Yeah, so
All right,
maybe about an average of 50 or
Okay.
so right now. Census.
Thanks, Katie. When we started, it was at 20%, and we needed to get it up. By the time I left Starwood Vacation Ownership, it was at 80%. So if I share with you quickly the metrics of how this works, I filled 60% of the room block at the Westin Maui, and all those people were there on a vacation package. And the average sale price of a week of timeshare next door was $40,000 per week, with a 80% commitment to a tour, and a 25% of those would actually buy a week of timeshare, which is astronomical considering no one walks into a timeshare gallery thinking they're going to buy anything. The net volume per guest of every family I put in a room at the Westin Maui was $8,000. So it shows you the monetization power of the timeshare industry. But I wanted to highlight that because I thought it just did a really good job of like illustrating, thinking through every touch point. I had to think through, where do people spend their time? And initially the idea of putting a desk near the pool or on the boardwalk, my boss was like, no, that's ridiculous. And we ended up selling excursions there. So the Boardwalk desk actually sold helicopter tours and scuba diving, and they provided service to people. And then at the end, it was always that soft touch. Hey, make sure you check out our villas. And so again, the challenge to you all is thinking through how you can motivate and engage your teams in new ways, field staff, dealers, partners, to bring those results full circle and really bringing your campaigns to life to drive higher volume and higher value. So I guess that was my second case under this topic of performance measurement and producing better outcomes. So actually, I didn't finish the story on this one. I wanted to share one more thing on this one. I was flying to Maui to meet with my marketers. I used to go quarterly and just check in with them. And I was sitting on the plane and I was looking at the results. So as I mentioned, we would generate generate leads at these desks. And the idea was anyone staying at nearby resorts, if we would capture their information, we would get them back on a vacation package and generate these same numbers. And so it was called a box program. And so I was looking at the numbers and I'm like, wow, the Hawaii team generated, I forget the numbers, X number of leads a year ago, and it generated like $5 million in revenue. And I thought, I want to share this with them, but I thought, they're like amiable, sociable salespeople. They're great with people. They don't want to look at a spreadsheet. But I took a chance and I walked into this meeting with my marketing managers and I said, do you guys know? And I showed them the numbers. I spent 20 minutes going through the numbers and they all sat up taller and they were smiling and they're looking at each other and they're like, that's amazing. So the other takeaway of this slide that I almost forgot to share was like, bringing your performance full circle actually motivates the people who are invested in bringing that campaign to market. So that was really the takeaway here is bringing your results full circle to those that were committed to executing the campaign can drive exponential results. Because guess what happened? The next quarter when I was in Maui, they doubled their lead gen. And then what ended up happening is that the Orlando team started to get competitive and they were trying to beat Hawaii. And then they were trying to compete with the Mexico team. And it snowballed this effective competition, which again was just a matter of using the data to inform everyone throughout the continuum of that campaign what their efforts produced for the company. And it really caused this investment, a greater investment or commitment in what each individual or each constituent was doing, which I think is a really powerful effect for as a leader of a cross-functional team. Any questions or comments on the second lever?
Yeah, something that I would just add, Jim, I would just challenge everyone here. We just wrapped up massive boat show for most of us in Lauderdale, and we generate so many leads at a big show like that. So I would just challenge you guys to think about what you're doing with those leads. Think about some of these examples that Jim has given, and what are some creative ways that we can send a personalized email, give a call to someone that was very qualified, make sure that they are continuing to move through your lead cycle and not just sitting getting stagnant just because we collected them at the booth. So make sure that we're thinking about creative ways to use those.
Thanks, Katie. Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll keep going. Third lever, utilizing marketing measurement for accurate prioritization and timing. When I was the vice president of leisure marketing at Starwood, I had to manage several constituent groups, and they all came with competing demands for channel access. So I had, marketing space requests from the timeshare sales teams, from our owner services group, the co-brand credit card group in New York, the corporate brand teams. Everyone wanted space on our website or in our emails, and it became this overwhelming, no-win situation. And so, as everyone was lobbying for their share of space, so it seems very logical. But again, as marketers, a lot of times we're overwhelmed or moving quickly. We don't take time to do this. But I established a monthly meeting, and I essentially required people. I created a one-page template, which was very high level. Really a business case is what I called it. And I said, whatever initiative that you want channel access to, let's review your business case in the monthly meeting. And so the takeaway here is, data doesn't lie when you're establishing your business priorities. So, require your partners and your constituents to really show their case and use the numbers to determine where you spend your money, where you fill your channels, So you can really, maximize business impact. And ultimately, it's an optimal customer experience as well, because you don't want just a lot of clutter, obviously. But ultimately, it's a discipline to say, we've got 5 great things to talk about, but if we can only have 3, which 3 are going to make the biggest impact on the business? And a lot of times those are tough choices. And sometimes you have to add one of the smaller initiatives in just to give that brand some time. But ultimately, we're all here to, for bottom line return. And so using the data and taking the time to analyze those things and to create business cases is really critical. And then similarly, but yet differently, this is a Walgreens example. And you might wonder, why does he have a Target picture up here? And these types of photos, we would actually start our monthly meetings. I'm referring to the marketing team at Walgreens. There were, I think, 9 of us that each owned a different area. I owned Serum and Loyalty, and then most of my peers owned a different merchandise vertical, like health and beauty, or over-the-counter drugs, or snacks and foods, that type of thing. So these marketing teams would come to the table every month, and they would be jockeying for their share of space in the store, their share of signage, their share of marketing spend. And what ended up happening is what we all know all too well, is that our door looked like this. And so the reason we would put the Target door up on this projector is we would all pause and say, that's what we're aspiring to be. How do we get there? How do we streamline? How do we simplify the clutter? It was just a standing joke, sadly, that our stores were just sensory overload with signage and clutter. And so we as a team became very disciplined. And so we created what was called a momentum map. And what we said was, as simple, it had 12 boxes that's cascaded from January to December. And each box had a large box and 2 smaller boxes underneath it. And it was simply that. That was our marketing map, our momentum map. And what we essentially said was, each month we can only have 3 themes in the store. There's one center stage and there's 2 side stage campaigns. Center stage got half of the marketing budget every month, $25 million to do 2 TV commercials. The other $25 million were shared among the 3 stage priorities. Everyone else took a back seat. And so same theme as the prior case, increasing your focus on a few things produced incrementally better results and a better shopping experience for our customers than trying to do everything and be all things to all people and satisfy the needs of every marketing manager. So the challenge to you here is, how can you prioritize and do fewer things with more impact? How can you organize your teams or align your initiatives around performance and letting the numbers dictate what takes priority and impact, and making sure you're maximizing the impact and producing ultimately bigger results? So I will pause there and see if there are any questions or comments on the third lever.
I think this is a really interesting call out, especially a lot of us who have product launches, retail campaigns, all the things. How do you figure out what's more important to promote without jumbling everything up? I think this is a really good call out.
Thank you. And I was joking with Katie sadly yesterday as we were reviewing the slides one last time. I said, I was trying to find a picture of a door when we launched Balance Rewards, and I couldn't find one. And sadly, this picture that I found, if you squint, you look at the 2 biggest posters, they're actually COVID posters. So I was telling Katie, it looks like the team at Walgreens has gone back to their old ways, because it's just as cluttered now as it was back then. But for a couple of years, we actually had those doors pretty clear, and our stores were much more streamlined than what they had been. But I guess maybe the takeaway there too, and to build on what you just said, I think that was Natalie, is that it takes discipline and it takes time to run the numbers and to review the numbers and to prioritize and think those things through. But spending a little time up front can have incremental return and ultimately, also more importantly, a better customer experience. Any other questions or comments?
Jim, can you talk about the strategies that you need to use to get everybody on the same page to get these implemented? A lot of times there's pushback, there's hesitation. You touched on that a little bit before, but that's a real struggle for a lot of us to get buy-in.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. And that's really why we went to the data. And really both of these cases, they were contentious situations. They were teams of people that all had their numbers they had to meet. They had to hit certain numbers by the end of the year. So they were doing their job. They were advocating and fighting for their share of channel space. But ultimately, it became, I think, two things. It was a cultural thing. I think that takes work to build a culture that's collaborative and that people are really willing to work together. And I think in both cases, we were in building mode at Starwood Vacation Ownership. We were building these villas. We were seeing things grow. So we were kind of building the plane as we were flying it. And so it was a very, very collaborative culture. It's one of the things I loved about Starwood Hotels. It was very entrepreneurial and very collaborative as we were all invested in growing this brand. But even at Walgreens, as we built the loyalty program, it was a pivotal moment. The CEO used to, as we were building the program it took us 18 months, the CEO would be doing his meetings and his presentations. And for like a year, every time he'd get up, he'd say, we're working on the biggest thing in company history. And I literally, I kid you not, I would break out in a sweat because I'm like, oh my God, like this is the biggest thing I've ever done. Imagining the $70 million launch budget and it's got to be perfect. And he keeps telling people it's the biggest thing in company history. And it literally was like, it was wearing on my mental health because of the pressure and the stress. But I think what ended up happening is that, and this is interesting too, I had never worked in an organization that big that actually had a change management department. So about 6 months into that launch, the CMO said, oh, you've got this woman, she's the director of change management and these 2 project managers to help you. And to be honest, I was like, I was clueless. I didn't know how to leverage them. I had never used a PMO before. And to the credit of my peer, this director of change management, she educated me on that. So what ended up happening is that really like 9 months before we launched, and hopefully this is getting to your answer a little bit, Brian, I spent as much time socializing the launch internally as I did focusing on the launch itself. So we had PR meetings, we had change management field meetings, we had education meetings with the rest of the marketing department that worked on the circular and brand marketing and didn't really know anything about direct marketing or loyalty programs. I spent probably, I think, 40% of my time educating and evangelizing internally. And what that created was a momentum within the culture and an expectation for what this program could do for the business. And I think that ultimately was the secret sauce, Brian, to what you're asking for, because even though the marketing leaders would come into the room every month and they all had their own sort of priorities, they recognized that what we were about to launch was going to just jump us even that much further forward. So maybe part of the answer is, think about what can you design in terms of strategy. How do you dangle that carrot out into the future a little ways that your team can focus on and say, we're going to get there. When you get people focused and mobilizing on big events, on big initiatives, on transformative projects, I think you find a greater heightened sense of collaboration, a greater sense of like what could be. People are thinking outside the box. And I think trying to build that kind of momentum is critical. So I think maybe one of the recommendations, and thanks for asking that question, Brian, is always as leaders thinking about how can I inspire and motivate the team and give them something to focus on or something to work toward that really inspires them to work even more closely together to really see something accomplished that maybe we didn't think we could do. Hopefully that answered your question a little bit better. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so in summary, we went through our 3 levers, making sure that your KPIs are aligned to those business objectives. And I think the key here is just, taking the time up front to really think about what you're doing. I think as marketers, for me, I know the creative side, the execution side is fun and exciting, but forcing yourself or maybe disciplining yourself is a better expression. Discipline yourself to write those business cases, to think through the financial impact, to forecast what you think is going to happen, and ensure that what you're measuring is aligned to ultimately where the company needs to go. Because as marketers, that's ultimately what we're there to do, is to drive, incremental revenue. Leveraging the measurement, your performance measurement to produce even better outcomes, thinking about different ways to measure your effectiveness, looking for alternate sources of data. And then finally, utilizing the measurement to prioritize and to help you with timing and to help you with that collaboration that sometimes can be difficult. So I want to leave you with 3 things that you can begin doing now. The first is looking for touch points where you can gather insights into your customers' needs and wants. I didn't really touch on this much in the cases, but it's really, really important. You know, when I was the VP of Leisure Marketing at Starwood, and email was kind of an emerging channel, which again makes me sound very, very old. We started sending out emails, and we were testing, you know, what people were opening and what they were engaging with. And I always used to tell them, I put a question at the bottom of the email. And of course, in our industry, it was fun, and it can be in yours as well, in the leisure space, is we would say things like, you know, at the bottom of an email, it would say, you know, what's your favorite destination? Mountain, beach, urban, that type of thing. And we would just do these little polls. And what I told my team as they were doing these polls, I said, we're building a database. We're building a greater understanding of the needs and desires of our customers. But at one point I had to caution them. I said, don't get ahead of ourselves. Do not ever ask for data that you're not prepared to use. And I'll share one other quick example because it looks like we have a little bit extra time. When I was hired by Walgreens, before I actually started there, I was super excited about the opportunity. And there was a CVS across the street from my neighborhood where we lived. And I went into the store, I grabbed a candy bar, and I got in line to pay for it. And my intention was to enroll in their loyalty program. And the woman in front of me took longer than I expected. And by the time I got to the cashier, there were 3 or 4 people behind me. And I put my candy bar on the counter, and I said, I'd like to join your loyalty program, please. And the cashier literally went, and she kind of fumbled under the desk, and she pulled this big pad of paper out, and she pulled this, it looked like a job application. It was 11 by 17. And she slapped a pen on the table, and she just kind of looked at me like, hurry up. And I can still remember that moment like it was yesterday, as I was frantically trying to fill out all this information. It literally was a job application. I'm glancing back at the people behind me, and they're all like, oh, would this guy hurry up? I cannot believe he's enrolling right now. And I took that to my first day on the job, and I said, when we launch this program, we need to use data and technology to streamline the enrollment process. And so one of the things that I actually did, and so this kind of goes back to this question of like, CVS asked for all this information and I never got anything from them. Like, why did they ask for all this data? And they never used it to personalize my experience. And guess what? I never really engaged with their program. And the other takeaway then is, you know, an ongoing back and forth, asking for little bits of information here or there is actually building a relationship. And consumers really love that, because most brands are and most marketers are in the business of just pushing their information out, push the offers, push what we want our customers to do. But when you create this 2-way dialogue, that's when you're actually building loyalty. And I talk a lot about loyalty is so much more than a program, and that's one example. The next thing you can start doing right now is determining what experiences you want to deliver and the estimated business impact. I kind of covered that up above when I was recapping the levers, but you know, really thinking through all those touch points, thinking through how you can optimize the customer experience where you can surprise and delight them, but at the same time, you know, deliver the impact, whether that be capturing data, opening up other opportunities to sell or to educate them, depending on, you know, the lead funnel. There's different things that you're doing throughout the funnel, obviously from top to middle to lower funnel. And then thirdly, identify what data you need and map out how you're going to get it. And one of the things I added here, again, recognizing that so many of you are probably sitting there thinking, yeah, these are great ideas, but I don't have anyone to do this, or I don't have the budget, I don't have the staff. One of the things I did at P.F. Chang's, the restaurant space has notoriously slim margins. And so even though private equity invested in hiring people like myself and a couple of other VPs to transform the business, we didn't have big teams. You know, I had 5 people on my team. And so we were a lean machine. And so one of the things that I did at P.F. Chang's is I took that full circle approach and I started engaging finance throughout all of our campaigns. And so I would ask them to help me do better forecasting up front, which they of course loved and appreciated. But then I would take the time to go back at the end and say, hey, here's what we learned from that last campaign. I think we can be more efficient, or I think if we did more analysis, we could get here. And the CFO said, you've got a you've got a finance manager. And so I literally had a finance manager assigned to marketing. I gained a team member just by showing them that we were invested in understanding the numbers and aligning what we were doing back to the business. And of course, the VP of Finance and the CFO loved that. So ask finance for help when you can. If you don't have the analytics staff on your team, there's always, IT and finance. See if you can get them to help you. And then secondarily, automate whenever you can. Again, the spirit of this is knowing that you're all very busy, strapped for resources. If there are ways, and there's a lot of off-the-shelf products now that don't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be a Salesforce install. There's a lot of solutions to automate things. You've got CMS systems and data lakes and things that don't have to be a big expensive endeavor that can help you to automate. Because again, I mentioned it earlier, the better you can get to real-time and relevant engagement, you'll have much greater results. So with that, we're finished, and we've got 9 minutes left for any other questions or comments or discussion. I appreciate your time, and happy to discuss further here at this time remaining.
Yeah, Jim, we've got one question in the chat from JB. It says, "Hi, I'm relatively new to the marine industry. My background is automotive and fast-moving consumables. Consumables loyalty has immediate results in data. This is not the same for longer-term purchases like automotive or boats. So two-part question. 1, what can we offer customers to keep them engaged? And 2, what actionable data can we collect on such a long purchase cycle?" Great question.
That's a big one, but it's awesome. Yeah, hopefully I'll remember all that. We could probably use the 9 minutes just on this. So I think it really comes down to journey mapping, which is kind of similar to some of the themes I've been talking about. I've been in different industries that have longer cycles as well. One of them was actually in the medical aesthetics industry. I stood up a digital innovation team at Allergan, and they own all of the #1 brands in the aesthetic space. So they own Botox and Juvederm and Cool Sculpting and SkinMedica, which is the #1 skincare line, dermatology grade skincare. But for those of you who don't know, you can inject Botox every 90 days, but you can only inject filler that people use in their lips and their cheeks 12 to 18 months. And so we ended up building models, because if you think about, I'm very visual. I wish I had a marker board with me. If you think about 90-day increments of remarketing to Botox, but then you layer on top of that a patient that also put in filler and she can only be marketed to every 18 months. We had all these complex algorithms around when should we speak to them and what content should we give her. And so I think it really comes back to thinking through what's the optimal conversion path, and then really identifying what are those moments of truth and what information can we capture along the way. So, I'll be honest, when I started working on a recent marine project, I opted into some of the brands that I was working on. And, I got 1 or 2 emails. No one asked me for any information. No one asked me where I lived. No one asked me how often I boat. No one asked me how many kids I have. I've got 4 teenagers. So there's a lot of things that, again, along the way, if you identify what would we like to know about them and when should we ask for it or how can we get it? Sometimes it's compiled data. Sometimes you overlay data on your prospects. And that's part of it too. When a lead comes in, some of the automation, and this doesn't have to be a Salesforce thing, some systems will allow you to overlay compiled data on top of those. In fact, I did that. I stopped short of explaining the Walgreens enrollment process that I designed, but what I did to overcome the CVS example was I worked with our CIO, who happened to be installing a new POS system at the time. And it took me 90 days to do this, but I call it the Apple effect. It was very hard to create something very simple. And what we did is we narrowed it down to 3 fields of information, and the rest was all data driven. So if you go into a Walgreens, you enroll in their loyalty program, it would ask you for your name, your phone number, and your zip code. And the pharmacy database and a compiled national database were already in the POS system, and it would match your information, and the cashier would turn the screen and she'd say, "Is this all correct?" And you go, "Yes," and boom, you were enrolled in the program. And that was something that I was passionate about from a customer experience standpoint. I didn't expect the reaction I got. It actually became a pillar of the program. People, outside the industry were talking about the slick, easy enrollment process at Walgreens. And so I know that's not relevant to your question, but coming back to your question, just thinking through the typical journey of going from a lead to a prospect to a sale, and identifying those moments where you might be able to engage that customer and get information, or moments where you can supplement. And whether that could be, giving your attendees, not your attendees, your staff at a boat show, for example, instructions on, hey, we're going to ask for these 3 pieces of information, and here's why, because these are going to tell us, the X is going to tell us Y, and that's going to get us here to Z. Hopefully, I'm going to pause there, and you can re-ask the question again, because I think I'm forgetting the second half of the question.
Second half was, what actual data can we collect on such a long purchase cycle?
Yeah. So again, I think it depends a little bit probably on, what brand or what part of the marine industry you're in. But again, I think it comes down to the lifestyle data, and the example I just shared with when I opted into a couple of boat brands. I was never asked, how big's my family? Where do I live? What type of year, because we lived in Southern California for the last 20 years. Now we live in Atlanta. Those are very different boating markets. Understanding and segmenting by market and understanding people's lifestyle, I think, is critical. And then figuring out how can you create those moments or those occasions to touch them. At eBay, it was all about occasions. Our marketing map was all occasion driven. So sometimes it's seasonality. Spring's almost here. Time to get the boat ready, that type of thing. If you're in the market as whether you're a dealer or a supplier, if you're selling parts or accessories, there's different timing and different messaging. But I think it's really thinking through, like, what messages we would like to get out, and at what point does it make sense, and then what information should we ask for in those moments.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We do have one more question, but I just would like to add on. One thing I think that's really important in our industry is to make your business or your brand relatable. So not only should you be talking about the product, but also about what makes your business or your brand unique. Why would somebody want to engage in you? How can you personalize? So it's not just a business, it's a human behind the business. That's really important in our industry as well. So the last question is, what are some of the most useful marketing analytics and data points to leverage and collect that are anonymous, not personal data?
That's a really good question too. Anonymous, not personal data. I think it comes down, I guess that I would link, if it's not personal data, I think then it comes down to understanding what your consumers think of your brand, more generally speaking. How do they use the brand? What do they expect of the brand? How does it compare to other brands? I think those are some critical, touch points to figure out what their figuring out what their expectations are. But I'm struggling on this one because I'm trying to figure out what would be defined as personal information. Lifestyle type information you could ask for that's not specifically PII. So I think that's probably meaningful. And then beyond that, I think also maybe even learning from other industries and figuring out what they're using. I know I've done that quite a bit, where you look to another industry to say, how did they get there? Because we want to get there. And what data are they using? So sometimes that can be usage information or usage trends that you see in or outside your industry. Sometimes it can be that customer satisfaction, attitudinal insights. And then the third is really lifestyle. And, what are they looking for? What do they want? What do they need?
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jim. Well, that's the last question in the chat here. Anything else live before we wrap up?
Great questions, guys.
Yeah. Okay, well, big thanks to Jim again for that wonderful presentation, and thanks to Brunswick for sponsoring the use of Teams for today's webinar. Have a wonderful weekend, you guys. We will meet back again in 2024 for our Q1 webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.